Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to speak to your heart, not just your mind. Because the truth is, many of us are living life with a silent enemy called worry. It's that quiet storm that steals your sleep, your peace, and your focus. You may smile in public, but deep inside there's a trembling question. What if things don't work out? But I want to remind you today, worry is faith in the wrong direction. It's believing that the worst will happen instead of trusting that God already has a plan for your life. You see, when you worry, you are trying to control what only God can handle. And when you surrender that control, you unlock peace that human effort can never produce. The plans of God are not random. They are intentional. Even when you don't understand the season you're in, He is working behind the scenes. The delay is not denial. It's divine preparation. The pain is not punishment. It's positioning. The unanswered prayer is not silence. It's strategy. So today, I challenge you to release the weight you were never meant to carry. Stop trying to figure out what God has already finished. Lift your eyes above the chaos, breathe again, and trust His process. Because when you trust God's plan, you don't need to see the whole path. You just need to take the next step in faith. Worry is one of the most silent destroyers of destiny. It doesn't come with noise, it doesn't shout, it whispers. It whispers to your heart that you are not enough, that your situation is too big, that your future is uncertain, that your faith is not strong enough. It makes you doubt everything God has already promised you. It creates a cloud of fear over a future that God already controls. When you worry, you give your energy to what you cannot change, and you drain your strength from what you can. Worry is not just a feeling, it is a misplaced trust. It's when the heart decides to believe the problem more than the promise. It's when you let temporary circumstances shape your permanent peace. And the truth is, worry is learned behavior. We learn to worry from experience, from disappointment, from fear, from lack, from pain. But the good news is, if you can learn worry, you can also unlearn it by learning to trust again. Because worry and trust cannot live in the same heart. One must die for the other to live. There are people today who pray but still worry. They say, God, I trust you, but their hearts are still restless. They go to bed thinking of what might go wrong, instead of resting in what God said will go right. That's not peace, that's exhaustion. That's spiritual fatigue. Peace doesn't come from having control. It comes from surrendering control. You were never designed to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You were designed to walk with the one who holds the world in His hands. Every time you choose worry over trust, you choose burden over blessing. And every time you choose trust over worry, you choose peace over pressure. The reason most people can't find peace is because they keep trying to understand God instead of trusting Him. Understanding can wait, but obedience cannot. Trust doesn't mean you know how things will work out. It means you believe they will work out for your good because God said so. You must learn to see life from God's perspective. He doesn't reveal everything because faith cannot grow in full sight. Worry grows in uncertainty, but so does faith. The difference is what you feed. If you feed your worry with fear, it will consume you. But if you feed your faith with truth, it will strengthen you. The same storm that makes one person panic can make another person pray. It's not the storm that determines your peace, it's your perspective. If you see problems as the end, you'll worry. But if you see them as preparation, you'll trust. Because sometimes God hides His best lessons inside your worst moments. What feels like a breakdown is often the setup for a breakthrough. What looks like loss is often a lesson in disguise. Worry will make you question timing. Trust will teach you patience. Worry says, God is late. Trust says, God is right on time. Worry says, what if it doesn't happen? Trust says, it already has. I just haven't seen it yet. You have to decide what voice you will believe. Because the voice you believe determines the peace you receive. If you believe the voice of fear, you will live in anxiety. If you believe the voice of faith, you will live in assurance. Worry keeps you busy doing nothing. You think, you plan, you analyze, you stress, but you make no progress. Trust sets you free to move forward without having all the answers. It allows you to live today with peace even if tomorrow is uncertain. When you learn to trust, you stop asking why and start saying thank you. Because even when you don't understand the process, you can trust the purpose. God's plan is not reactive, it's redemptive. He doesn't just respond to your situation. He designed it to shape you. That delay you hate might be the protection you need. That closed door you cried over might be the redirection that saves your future. God doesn't waste pain, and He never loses control. Worry convinces you that life is random. Trust reminds you that life is written. Every season has a reason. Every battle has a lesson. Every challenge has an outcome that pushes you closer to destiny. There are moments when your faith will be tested in silence. God will seem quiet. Heaven will seem far. And in those moments, worry will whisper, "You've been forgotten." But trust answers, "No, I've been prepared." Silence is not absence, it's strategy. Sometimes God is quiet because He's working. You don't see the roots growing underground, but they are. You don't see the foundation being built, but it is. You don't see the purpose unfolding, but it's happening. Don't let silence make you doubt what God already said. Faith must sometimes walk without feelings. Trust must sometimes move without sight. Because the plan is already complete, you are just catching up to it. Worry is like sitting in a rocking chair. You move a lot, but you go nowhere. It keeps your mind busy but your spirit empty. It makes you live in tomorrow while missing today. You lose peace trying to predict what only God can control. You were not created to live in prediction, but in provision. God doesn't give you all the answers at once because He wants you to learn dependency. If you had everything figured out, you wouldn't need Him. So He allows uncertainty not to punish you, but to pull you closer. Worry makes you focus on what's missing. Trust makes you focus on what's promised. And when you focus on what's promised, you begin to see evidence of His hand even in hard times. Trust is not a feeling, it's a decision. You must decide every morning, I will trust God today. Even when you feel afraid, even when you feel lost, even when you don't see a way. Because trust is not built in comfort, it's built in confusion. You learn trust when you can't explain what's happening, but still believe something good is being formed. Trust turns chaos into clarity. It allows you to rest in the middle of the unknown. It says, God, I don't know what's coming, but I know you're already there. That's the power of divine trust. It gives you peace before the miracle, not just after. Maybe you've spent years worrying about things that never even happened. Maybe you've lost sleep over situations that God already worked out behind the scenes. Maybe you've been so busy fearing the future that you missed the beauty of the present. Let today be the day you trade your worry for worship. Let it be the day you exchange control for confidence. Because when you finally let go, you'll discover that God's plan has always been better than your expectation. His ways are higher. His timing is perfect. His purpose is unshakable. And your part is simple trust. Even when it hurts. Even when it's unclear. Even when it feels impossible. Because the peace you seek is not found in answers. It's found in surrender. Worry is the fruit of fear, but trust is the root of faith. Fear is a seed planted by uncertainty, watered by doubt, and harvested by anxiety. It begins small, a question, a hesitation, a what if, and before you realize it, it grows into a tree that shades your peace and blocks your vision. Worry feeds that fear until it becomes a habit, and when fear becomes a habit, faith becomes silent. You cannot grow in faith while feeding fear. They are opposite systems. One draws power from heaven, the other from hell. One builds, the other breaks. One opens doors, the other closes them. Every day, your mind becomes the battleground between these two forces. Fear says, it's too late. Faith says, God is never late. Fear says, you can't handle it. Faith says, you're not meant to handle it alone. The key to overcoming worry is to trace its root back to fear, and then replace that fear with truth, because fear grows in the absence of truth. When you know the truth, you begin to rest. Truth tells you that God's plan is not uncertain. Truth tells you that your future is not an accident. Truth tells you that what's beyond your control is still within His hands. Every time you meditate on fear, you magnify the problem. But every time you meditate on truth, you magnify God's power. Faith doesn't ignore the storm, it walks through it with confidence. It doesn't deny reality, it redefines it through divine perspective. When you choose faith, you shift your focus from what's happening around you to what's happening within you. Because God doesn't always change the situation first. He changes your spirit. He changes your perception before your position. The same storm that once scared you will one day strengthen you, because faith transforms how you interpret everything. You start seeing difficulties not as dead ends, but as directions. You start viewing closed doors not as rejection, but as redirection. And in that mindset, worry has no soil left to grow in. Faith and fear both demand belief, but in opposite outcomes. Fear asks you to believe in the worst. Faith asks you to believe in the best. Fear makes you imagine defeat. Faith makes you anticipate victory. And what you expect, you attract. That's why people who worry always find more reasons to worry, while people who trust always find more reasons to rejoice. The mind is like soil. It will grow whatever seed you plant. If you keep planting fear, you'll keep harvesting anxiety. But if you plant trust, you'll harvest peace. True faith is not blind. It just sees beyond the visible. It sees through the chaos into the purpose. It knows that behind every no is a better yes, and behind every delay is divine timing. Faith knows that even when you can't trace God's hand, you can trust His heart. Fear makes you question God's character, but faith reminds you of His consistency. When fear says, "You're alone," faith says, "You are covered." When fear says, "This is the end," faith says, "This is the beginning." So the question is not whether fear will come. It will. The question is what you will do when it comes. Will you feed it with worry, or will you starve it with faith? Because you cannot stop the thoughts from arriving, but you can stop them from building a home. The presence of fear is not failure. The persistence of faith in the presence of fear is victory. Worry focuses on what is seen, but faith focuses on what is promised. And when you learn to live from the promise, not the problem, you discover a peace that nothing can shake. You realize that fear loses its voice the moment you give faith the microphone. God's silence is not His absence, it is His preparation. Silence is the unseen classroom of faith, the place where trust is tested, shaped, and strengthened. When God seems quiet, He is not ignoring you. He is developing you. He is preparing your spirit to receive what your mouth has been asking for. The silence of God is never empty, it is filled with purpose. It's the pause between your prayer and His manifestation, the moment when He refines your motives, sharpens your focus, and deepens your maturity. You may not hear His voice, but that doesn't mean He has left you. It means He's teaching you to walk by faith, not by feelings. Most people panic when heaven seems quiet. They assume something is wrong, that maybe God has forgotten them, that maybe their prayers have gone unheard. But silence is not rejection, it's refinement. Think about a teacher during an exam. The teacher is always silent while the students are being tested. Not because the teacher doesn't care, but because the answers have already been taught. The test isn't to reveal what you don't know, it's to reveal what you've learned. That's what divine silence is. A test of trust. It asks, will you still believe even when you don't hear me? Will you still walk even when you can't see me? In silence, God builds endurance. He stretches your capacity to wait, to believe, to remain steadfast. Because destiny requires discipline. If He gave you everything too soon, you wouldn't be ready to handle it. The silence of God is His way of shaping the vessel before pouring out the blessing. He hides you not to punish you, but to prepare you. He withholds not to hurt you, but to make you ready for more. Every delay, every unanswered prayer, every quiet night of tears, they are ingredients of preparation. While you are waiting on God, He is working on you. There is a mystery in silence that worry cannot understand. Worry interprets silence as absence, but faith interprets silence as activity. You don't see it, but God is arranging people, shifting opportunities, aligning time and place, making sure that when the door opens, it opens to destiny, not disaster. Sometimes He closes doors because what's on the other side is too small for you. Sometimes He lets people walk away because their season in your life is complete. Sometimes He allows confusion because it forces you to seek clarity in Him. Every silent season has a sound in heaven, the sound of construction. God is building something that you will one day walk into. Silence also teaches you to hear differently. When God stops speaking through circumstances, He starts speaking through peace. When the noise of the world fades, your spirit becomes sensitive to His whisper. You start discerning His will not by what you see, but by what you sense. You learn that stillness is not inactivity, it's intimacy. You stop chasing signs and start seeking presence. You stop begging for answers and start resting in assurance. That's the shift silence creates, from anxiety to awareness, from striving to surrender. There is something powerful about people who learn to wait well. Waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing what matters while trusting God to do the rest. It's about maintaining your faith, guarding your peace, and refusing to let frustration poison your focus. When you wait with purpose, silence becomes sacred. You realize that the same God who was speaking loudly in your past is still working quietly in your present. The form changed, but the faithfulness didn't. Many times, the silence of God comes before the biggest shifts of your life. Before promotion, there's always preparation. Before manifestation, there's always meditation. Before revelation, there's always reflection. Silence is the space between sowing and reaping, the place where your roots go deeper, even though nothing seems to be happening on the surface. And that's why you can't give up when you don't hear anything. The seed doesn't make noise when it grows, but it's growing. The foundation doesn't shout when it's being built, but it's being built. God may be silent, but He is not still. In every silent season, you are being trained for what you prayed for. You are being equipped to handle the weight of the next level. God's silence is His mercy. He doesn't give you what you're not yet prepared to sustain. When you are silent long enough to listen, you begin to realize that silence itself is a language. It says, "Be still and know." It says, "Trust me beyond what you understand." It says, "Your delay is not denial, it's development." And when you finally step into what He was preparing you for, you'll look back and thank Him for every quiet moment, every tear that taught you patience, every prayer that seemed unanswered but was actually being transformed into purpose. When you trust God's plan, uncertainty becomes your classroom for destiny. Life was never designed to be fully predictable. If you could see everything ahead of you, there would be no need for faith, no space for growth, and no reason to depend on the one who sees beyond time. The unknown is not meant to intimidate you, it's meant to educate you. Every season of uncertainty is a divine classroom where God teaches lessons that comfort can never teach. When life doesn't make sense, when doors close without explanation, when people leave without reason, when prayers seem unanswered, those moments are not chaos, they are curriculum. In the school of destiny, uncertainty is the teacher that trains your trust. Faith is not tested when everything is clear. It's tested when everything is confusing. It's easy to believe when you can trace the plan, but real trust begins when you can't. God often hides direction inside of uncertainty. He allows life to feel unstable so that your stability will no longer depend on circumstances, but on conviction. You cannot lead where you have not learned to trust. And you cannot walk in purpose if you panic every time the path shifts. The uncomfortable truth is that God's plan will often contradict your logic. He will lead you into places that make no sense, not to confuse you, but to confront your need for control. He does not reveal the whole map because His goal is not to make you comfortable, but to make you complete. The unknown exposes what you truly believe. When nothing goes as planned, you discover whether your peace is anchored in the plan or in the planner. If your peace depends on details, it will always be fragile. But if your peace depends on trust, it will be unbreakable. That's why sometimes God will remove what you depend on, not to destroy you, but to remind you that He is enough. He will strip away your plan so you can see His purpose. He will take you through seasons where you can't predict the next step, so you can learn to walk by faith not by sight. The uncertainty you fear is often the very tool God uses to reveal your strength. When you truly trust God's plan, your prayers change. You stop praying for easy paths and start praying for endurance. You stop asking for answers and start asking for alignment. You stop demanding explanations and start desiring understanding. Trust shifts your focus from, "Why is this happening to me?" to, "What is this preparing me for?" Because every delay has instruction, every disappointment has direction, and every detour has destiny hidden inside it. What you call confusion, God calls construction. What you call waiting, God calls working. What you call loss, God calls lesson. The uncertainty of life is not a punishment, it's preparation. God will often use what you don't understand to prepare you for what you've been praying for. Sometimes He will allow the plan to fall apart just to show you that His purpose still stands. That job you lost might be the open door to your calling. That relationship that ended might be protection disguised as heartbreak. That closed opportunity might be the redirection that saves your future. Trust doesn't mean everything makes sense. It means you believe it will make sense when it needs to. Because what feels random to you is perfectly orchestrated by Him. There's power in surrendering the need to know everything. When you stop demanding details and start embracing trust, peace becomes your companion. You stop trying to manipulate outcomes and start flowing with divine timing. You learn to rest in the rhythm of grace. The uncertainty that once caused panic now produces praise because you begin to see that nothing is wasted. Every setback is set up. Every pause has purpose. Every delay has design. Trust allows you to live above confusion because you no longer measure God's goodness by your comfort, but by His character. Uncertainty will either break you or build you, and trust determines which it will be. People who refuse to trust will always live reacting to life. But those who trust live responding to purpose. They move even when they don't see. They give even when they don't have. They believe even when they don't understand. That's the kind of trust that moves mountains. Not because mountains change, but because your perspective does. You stop seeing obstacles as opposition and start seeing them as opportunities. You begin to understand that divine plans are not always painless, but they are always perfect. The truth is, you can't grow faith in clarity. Faith grows in fog. It grows in those moments when you can't tell what's happening, but you choose to keep walking. The unknown becomes the place where God reveals who you are. Because trust is not only about believing in God's plan, it's also about discovering your identity within it. The process doesn't just deliver blessings, it develops character. The more you trust, the more you transform. The more you release control, the more you gain peace. So when life feels uncertain, when the future feels blurry, and the path seems dark, don't fight the process. The classroom of uncertainty is producing something eternal. The lessons you're learning in confusion today will become your wisdom in clarity tomorrow. The trust you build in the dark will become your confidence in the light. You may not understand the plan right now, but one day you'll look back and realize that every unanswered question, every unplanned turn, and every quiet night was preparing you for a future far greater than you could have imagined. Faith is the bridge between worry and fulfillment. Worry keeps you stuck on the wrong side of that bridge, staring at what you fear, imagining every possible disaster, and convincing you that the crossing is impossible. Trust, on the other hand, allows you to step onto the bridge with confidence, even when you cannot see the end. You will never overcome worry by analyzing every problem. You overcome it by stepping into faith. Faith doesn't require all the answers. It requires obedience to take the next step, trusting that God has already prepared the ground beneath your feet. Every time you choose worry over faith, you delay your own progress. But every time you choose trust, you accelerate your destiny. Worry focuses on what is out of your control, while faith focuses on what is already in God's control. When you live in worry, your mind is occupied with threats and failures, real or imagined. But when you live in faith, your mind is occupied with promises, hope, and possibilities. The difference is not in the circumstances, it's in perspective. Two people can face the same storm. One panics, the other prays. One sees a wall, the other sees a doorway. The storm is not what defines the outcome, it is the decision of the heart. Faith allows you to walk through fear while keeping your eyes fixed on the one who holds your tomorrow. Your worry does not protect you, it paralyzes you. Your anxiety does not prepare you, it distracts you. But faith energizes you. Faith gives you clarity when the world seems chaotic. Faith gives you courage when the path seems dangerous. Faith gives you patience when the waiting seems unbearable. And the more you practice trusting, the stronger the bridge becomes. You will learn that faith is not just about waiting for God to act. It is about partnering with Him in obedience while resting in His timing. Every action taken in faith becomes a step toward fulfillment. Every choice to trust becomes a declaration of peace, and every surrender becomes a testimony of victory. Trust is active, not passive. It does not mean sitting idly while life passes by. It means taking steps aligned with God's purpose, knowing that He is guiding every step. It means living intentionally in obedience while leaving outcomes in divine hands. Worry asks, what if I fail? Faith answers, what if God succeeds? Worry focuses on loss, faith focuses on promise. Worry imagines defeat, faith anticipates triumph. And in that contrast, you discover the power to overcome, not by your understanding, not by your ability, but by the certainty of God's plan. When worry comes, let it remind you that trust is required. When fear whispers, let faith speak louder. When uncertainty threatens, let the assurance of God's purpose steady your heart. Because the reality is that the future belongs to those who trust, not to those who fret. Your destiny is not determined by your circumstances, it is determined by your trust. The one who walks by faith crosses the bridge of uncertainty and arrives at the fullness of what God prepared long before the worry ever appeared. Peace is the reward of trust, and trust is the choice that separates those who live in anxiety from those who live in assurance. Every worry, every fear, every what if you carry is a weight that keeps you from moving freely into your destiny. God never intended for you to walk burdened by the unknown. He intended for you to walk in confidence, knowing that His plans are perfect and His timing is flawless. The choice is yours. You can hold on to worry and remain captive to uncertainty, or you can release it and step into the freedom that trust provides. Trust is not wishful thinking. It is an active declaration that you believe in God's sovereignty over your life, even when circumstances seem confusing. When you choose trust, you begin to see evidence of God's hand in places where you once saw only chaos. Opportunities appear that were hidden, doors open that were closed, and answers come that were delayed. Trust allows you to navigate life without the constant fear of failure, because you understand that what God ordains cannot be overturned by human limitation or opposition. Faith transforms your perspective. What once seemed like a dead end becomes a detour to a greater destination. What appeared as a setback becomes the set up for a breakthrough. And what felt like loss becomes the lesson that shapes your future success. Trust also teaches patience, and patience produces endurance. The world demands instant results and immediate satisfaction, but divine timing works differently. God's plan unfolds according to His wisdom, not our urgency. Every delay is an opportunity to grow, every trial is an opportunity to strengthen, and every unanswered question is an opportunity to deepen your reliance on Him. Worry tempts you to act prematurely. Trust enables you to act appropriately. Trust removes the pressure of controlling outcomes and replaces it with the confidence that God is already at work. The more you practice trusting God's plan, the less power worry has over your mind. It loses its grip as you feed your heart with truth instead of fear. You begin to replace thoughts of doubt with declarations of faith. You begin to anticipate good instead of fearing bad. You begin to rest in the certainty that even if the path is unclear, the destination is secure. Trust is the compass that guides you through the fog of uncertainty, and peace is the reward when you follow it without hesitation. Ultimately, overcoming worry is not about changing your circumstances. It is about changing your heart. It is about deciding that God's plan is greater than your fear, that His promises are stronger than your doubts, and that His timing is better than your impatience. When you choose trust over worry, You align yourself with the flow of divine purpose. You embrace the rhythm of grace, and you open the door to the blessings that were waiting for your faith to act. Your peace does not depend on what happens around you. It depends on what happens within you when you decide to trust.